Well, good morning, everybody, once again. I think most of you were already here for the first part of the morning, and now we are moving to the Circle U Prize for Interdisciplinary Research, widely known as ICUP Award Ceremony, 2024 edition. We'll start with Professor Antoinette Fage-Butler, who comes from the University of Aarhus in Denmark. Antoinette started her studies in Ireland, where she is originally from, pursued her studies in English literature in Scotland, then subsequently moved to Aarhus and completed her PhD on science communication in 2012, if I'm not mistaken. Correct? And afterwards, Antoinette kept working on science communication, risk communication, most recently on communication in time of pandemic. Her first encounter with Circle U was in the frame of the interdisciplinary thematic research networks. She was a successful recipient of one interdisciplinary thematic research network funding and developed a research project together with the colleagues from the University of Oslo and from Humboldt on the topic of climate change and student engagement. This project led Antoinette on its turn to the ICUP application, and the ICUP evaluation panel appreciated a lot Antoinette's project called Towards Better Climate Futures. And I apologize for my voice, it's gone, it's slowly coming back, but it's much better than it was last week. Anyway, Antoinette, the floor is yours, and afterwards, Self and Gore will act as a discussant to lead the discussion with the audience. The floor is yours, Antoinette.
First of all, thank you so much, Natalia, I'm delighted to be here. I really am thrilled to receive this and feel very, very honoured. So, yeah, it's a very nice day for me. So as you can see, the title of my talk, and indeed the project, is Pursuing Interdisciplinary and Transdisciplinary Paths Towards Better Climate Futures. And I'd like to maybe give a little bit of narrative about this. We heard about the importance of telling good stories at the very start of the day today, and I hope I can do the same on my own research. So there are two related projects that form the basis of my application, and they have things in common. Both aim to gain traction on wicked problems, climate change and unsustainability, to improve environmental conditions. Both go beyond monodisciplinarity, both embrace interdisciplinarity, and one has an element of transdisciplinarity. Both are tilted towards the future, and both acknowledge the role of values as an aspect of trust and mistrust, and as inherent to sustainability. So where there's sustainability, there are values at stake. The lovely thing about this, as well as I get to acknowledge the collaborators I've had who made this possible for me to even receive a prize, because interdisciplinarity involves others. And it's with great pride I introduce my colleagues from the interdisciplinary project at Aarhus University called Mistrust of Scientific Expertise. And the parentheses there are actually interesting and relevant, because I'm interested in the sort of grey zone between trust and mistrust, and we are as a group. And we were generously supported by Aarhus University Research Foundation for this project. We look at public trust in climate science, but we also look at vaccine, and I'll talk more about that in a minute, just in passing, where we explore trust and mistrust as cultural and contextual phenomena. So instead of the maybe more typical perspective on trust as a psychological phenomenon, we want to look at it as in its discursive traces, both in online communication and other written forms. I would really like to say a few words about my colleagues. So from the top, Christian Wittfeldt-Nielsen is an associate professor. He leads the Centre for Science Studies at the Faculty of Science. Moving into a new faculty then, we have Loni Leatherar, who's an associate professor from public health, and of course that's the Faculty of Medicine. And then three more colleagues from Faculty of Arts: Niels Brøgger, a professor of media studies; Christopher Nielbo, who's professor of this and leader of a Centre for Humanities Computing at Arts as well; and Helene Doon, who was our research assistant anthropology. So she has an anthropological background. So if you like, we are a group of people from 3 different faculties and involving 6 different disciplinary fields. So I think that was essential to the whole way we worked and how we worked, and even the research questions we adopted. Just to say a word or two about this trust in vaccines, I'm just actually including this as a sort of a little tag on, but I want to show what can happen when people with different backgrounds and methods combine forces. So we looked at trust and mistrust in MMR vaccine, measles, mumps and rubella vaccine in Danish newspapers. So we're looking at how journalists communicate about the vaccine. And we had a long time perspective over many years, and we combined both computational analysis and qualitative framing analysis. So we were people who had expertise in these areas already. You can see some of the graphs. I mean, they're quite interesting to look at, and the paper is online if you'd like to have a look. But there are certainly advantages of the multi-method. In relation to trust in the MMR vaccine, the computational analysis allowed us to see broad patterns and dynamics and how the discourse evolved over time. And framing analysis allowed purchase on the ways in which mistrust was framed, so in terms of something that is undesirable and facilitated by social media, which this computational approach maybe would have been less good at showing. It was more interested and better at focusing on the dynamics. But moving on and back to the environmental approach, you'll see here that we have 3 of us, and from, again, 3 different faculties, worked with public trust and mistrust of climate science using the methodology of a meta-narrative literature review. And we needed to be interdisciplinary to do this because we're interested in how it's being conceptualized. And if there are many different disciplines looking at this, then it helps that we're a broad base across different faculties as well, also bringing our disciplinarities to bear on this. And we found that there was often a lack of definition of trust. We found different conceptualizations of trust. Attitudinal refers to the psychological one. Cognitive has to do with the reflective on the trustworthiness of it and the trustworthiness or reflections on how trustworthy science is. Contextual, it's maybe quite obvious what that is. Contingent, we needed this because we needed to show its contingencies both as impacted by, impacting and impacted by various factors, be it demographic or ideological or whatever. Affective has to do with emotion, and communicated was where we looked at how science communicators actually indicated their trustworthiness to the public. I'd also like to say a word or two about this book that's coming out. It's called Science, Communication and Trust, and it will also be open access. And again, with 2 co-editors, there's 3 editors altogether. And we come from these different faculties, and we're delighted that there will be 22 chapters from altogether 50 international authors from Mexico to Australia, in fact, that have written chapters in this book, and we're very proud of this and looking forward to this being published. We're at the nearly ready to ship it off to Palgrave Macmillan. And you can see that the chapters fall into 3 different areas there in terms of trustworthy science communicators, trust in the field of science communication, and trust in science. You remember from my title that the word transdisciplinary turned up, and I want to say a little word about that road. How did I get interested in transdisciplinarity? Well, it happened actually through a book where I got funding, this time from Carlsberg Foundation, to write a monograph, a research monograph. And the title is Risk and Responsibilization in Public Communication. And the 2 cases are the pandemic and climate change. And it sort of allowed me to get into depth with transdisciplinarity, what it is and what it can offer. And the reason why transdisciplinarity suddenly seemed so appealing was because we're looking at these values and value landscapes and, science, socio-scientific topics like climate change and the pandemic need a focus on values and knowledge. So it seems to me right that we should, that this should be a way that risk communication actually in the future could work to a greater extent rather than the one-way communication that's often typical. Now, Natalia has mentioned this. I was also delighted to receive an interdisciplinary thematic research network funding for a Circle U project called Risk, Future Narratives and Sustainability. And this is us, that's me in the green jacket on the far right, and you can see people, young, fantastic faces there as well, because we had 9 students from three different Circle U universities. And also part of this, of course, were my co-PIs. So we have Ivan Engelbrechtsen from the Faculty of Medicine at Oslo, who's also leading the Open Campus, who's the chair of that, or the dean of that rather. And Mona Baker, who also has affiliation with the Sustainable Health Unit at Oslo. And Anna Indovitz, who's a climate narrative or climate fiction narrative expert, a professor at Humboldt University of Berlin. So there is that, you can see we do span 2 faculties and different fields again here, but we also have wonderful students who also came with different disciplinary backgrounds. And I think these disciplinary backgrounds meant that the conversations were really rich. And the ideas that the students came up with were absolutely wonderful. And their disciplinary backgrounds are horticulture, literature, business communication, law, fine arts, and medicine. So again, quite a spread, but it was kind of like a double-layered sort of sandwich of disciplinarities, which we think was very valuable. We'll be writing a paper about this, which is going to be published hopefully soon, coming out, but I can't say where yet. You see the Sustainable Development Goals, and the students were tasked with considering how could we make new Sustainable Development Goals? What might they look like for beyond 2030 into 2045? What might they look like? And this was really amazing what they came up with, and I actually want to sort of highlight this text in the middle, which is a text from a Padlet that was created on the day. And this is from the students. This is only a tiny little morsel of the fantastic comments and responses they had to this task. So instead of calling them Sustainable Development Goals, they thought, goals are too vague. Let's make it more real and more concrete. So they were suggesting things like sustainable guidelines for all nations, or even more specifically, again, actions for sustainability. So, I mean, this is really fantastic, and this was of their own accord, thinking, we don't want goals anymore, we need something to happen. The goals have not been met, they're not going to be met, and we need something to hold people accountable. And you'll see that in this particular example, that the students, the participants who were involved, wanted more focus on the non-human perspective. So let's stop focusing on ourselves and move away from this anthropocentric focus on ourselves and our continuation of our own lifestyles. It's just really amazing, and there was much more beyond that that I was extremely amazed and proud of to witness, and I just got goose pimples many times and felt there were so many mic drop moments. I really couldn't be more impressed with the participants. Just a little word or two about this, because I have said that transdisciplinarity, that looks a little funny, but transdisciplinarity and interdisciplinarity feature in the projects. And I have slightly, maybe pedagogically, included in a text box what they are, and at least from my point of view. And from my point of view, interdisciplinarity occurs where we're people that bring our own disciplinarities with us, and that we don't try and merge it into one sort of solution. We, of course, are pulling in the same direction. But the beauty of interdisciplinarity is its richness, that it brings new perspectives on the same object of inquiry. So we all had our disciplinary takes, we're all entitled to them. This is true for both projects I mentioned, the Trust and Science project, but also sustainability. We had that extra richness, which just made it better. And then transdisciplinarity has to do with acknowledging and really recognising the knowledge and the values of the public. And it's particularly relevant for wicked problems. And it's maybe, well, it is a very different way of doing research. And I've really got an appetite for more of this, because I could see the tremendous potential of, letting young people define sustainability as they saw it. So it really was an amazing experience. And now I'll round off by saying thanks a million, as we would in Ireland, thanks a million, or tusen tak, as we'd say in Denmark, to Circle U, because it has been hugely valuable for me in pushing me and facilitating things for me. I mean, the push comes from almost opens up new doors. And facilitates things. So I really am super happy that I've been involved in this from quite early on. Aarhus University, of course, as well. I'm so happy to have had support from Aarhus University. I'm so happy that Aarhus University is part of Circle U. I hope to continue to develop links to Circle U through Aarhus University. My colleagues, I really want to thank them for their participation in projects that they found interesting to work with me on. And that's locally at Aarhus, but also further away we have Humboldt University of Berlin, and also, of course, Oslo, University of Oslo. And it would be wrong for me not to mention my family. They've supported me so much through this research journey. So again, flowers to you all, and thanks so much for this fantastic opportunity.
Now we can take some questions. Is going to be our
thank you, Natalia, for inviting me.
Shall I briefly introduce you?
Myself. Okay, I'm Xiaofeng Guan. I work here at University of Paris City. I'm a physicist. I work on energy efficiency, and renewable energy. So I'm also one of the chair in the Knowledge Hub Climate in Circle U. Yes, it's my honor to be here to moderate the discussion with Antoinette. Very interesting projects, both of them, and flowers to you first. I have a lot of questions for myself, but I would like to see if there's any question from the audience first.
If there are no questions, maybe I'll briefly complete your introduction, because these elements may be also interesting for the audience. Well, Xiaofeng is originally from China. He started in Wuhan University. Now everybody knows where it is, Wuhan. Continued in Shanghai University, came to Grenoble as a foreign student to France, and then stayed in France ever since. So he is now a professor at Université Paris Cité and researcher at an interdisciplinary energy research institute in Paris. And this institute's director, Professor Mathieu Arnaud, is with us today. He's going to take part in the roundtable in the afternoon. And I think this institute is also very relevant to what Circle U does with the Knowledge Hub on climate. Tomorrow morning, Xiaofeng organizes a roundtable with some of the Circle U Climate Knowledge Hub chairs on climate change and education. So if you're interested in this roundtable, do reach out to Xiaofeng. It's taking place tomorrow morning, probably even here, right?
No, not here. It's 8:30. Tomorrow at the other site of the university is 45 Rue Saint-Père. It's like 10 minutes walk from here, and it lasts like 1 hour and a half. And the main topic will be the pedagogical support, like textbooks, videos, and a lot of materials that can be used for the climate change education. That is the topic of the tomorrow's roundtable. So
would you like to ask probably first your questions to Antoinette?
Yeah.
And maybe some other questions from the audience.
Yes, I have several questions. First one, you said that climate change sustainability, one of them is, both of them are interdisciplinary, and one of them is transdisciplinary. How do you differentiate them?
Thanks for that really good question, and I maybe glided a little over it because it's only partly transdisciplinary. It's only got a flavour of it. And it's sort of, for me, what it has in common with transdisciplinary research, and by that I mean the ITRN project where the students were involved, is that it included people with a view to promoting their possibilities of having their say. So in that respect, it's transdisciplinary, but then no more, because it doesn't, there's much more that one could do with transdisciplinary research. What would be the follow-on? I mean, I haven't accounted for that. But how it is transdisciplinary is in its focus on and respect for the knowledge and values knowledge is called by some academics, because it's a combination. It's not that there is knowledge and there are values, but they're often combined. So it's really a way of respectfully engaging with the public, and it's my first taste of it, and I really would love to continue with this, because I think I found it. We need input for this challenge of sustainability, and it was so clear to me that the young people have so many wonderful ideas. So I think that's maybe the answer on the transdisciplinary. And interdisciplinary is more the combined forces of academics. So we're not really involving anything other than academics. So interdisciplinarity is more pooling of resources towards resolving maybe a common issue, and the interesting perspectives that can come out of that. It's having more than one lens on a problem.
So when you call for respect for science, for researchers in the university, most of us, we are researchers, we're happy to hear that. So there is a responsibility, clearly there is a responsibility from the general public to trust science. But I'm wondering if we can probably also criticize scientists like me in our way of communication, because generally we are used to write publication in a very specific protocol, very difficult to understand by another discipline. Do you have some words to say about this?
Yeah, I think first of all, Professor Guo, I'm sure you do a fantastic, and I know you do a fantastic job, and you're interested already in communication with your project tomorrow. There is a place for monodisciplinarity as well, and there is a place for academic endeavour and really applying monodisciplinary approaches to really understanding something. So, and we bring this with us, also us, in our own capacity within the projects we're doing. So it is not to negate the value of monodisciplinarity, but rather to say that more perspectives on the same thing with a pool of people working together can really enhance results. And I can tell you that I've sat with my colleagues and sometimes felt a little bit like, okay, you're really questioning how I'm doing this, or you don't see what I mean. And then I realised I've got an assumption that I am there's a little friction there, and that's because they have a different perspective, or I've assumed something that they've highlighted for me. And I think that's really useful. So it exposes our blind spots as well. I hope I'm answering your question insofar as interdisciplinarity can help a lot. Was your question about science communication to the public as well? Because I really
yes, to the public.
I could also say something about that I'm hoping to do a project on participatory approaches to science communication, inspired by people like Matthias Kaiser and others who talk about the transdisciplinary impulse and how important it is for conducting science. So science itself is not value free, and we kind of we need to, there's maybe that idea, but there are values baked into science as well, and I think particularly for topics that are socio-scientific, so they impact people quite a lot. It could be vaccines or climate change, or having to suddenly adopt new behaviours in the pandemic. Then it's really important to have a sensitivity around people's values and maybe take them on board. And their knowledge. There's more to it than just values. It's also what people know themselves, their local situation. There's a huge tradition in STS, Science and Technology Studies, of saying, well, there are also other forms of knowledge that can also enhance, knowledge more generally.
So you have been studying COVID-19. The trust and mistrust about vaccine, and you have also been investigating sustainability and climate change, and you mentioned about a word which is future, and unfortunately, probably climate change is very slow, difficult to perceive by general public, and the pandemic is totally different.
Yeah.
So what lessons have you learned from pandemic study that you can reuse them in the climate change sustainability study? This is my last question.
and it's a great question. That's on temporality, and we've had the word futures mentioned many times. We want to create a better future. This is a different kind of temporality, though. This is pace. This is the speed at which things can be changed or not, or visibly changing. And I remember also seeing these numbers going up. We saw people, struggling for their breaths in hospitals. It was very dramatic, and it was happening so quickly. So it opened up for us quite clearly the dangers, and this was dangerous. Potentially, and numbers there were people sadly dying from it. And the problem, as you rightly point out, is that climate change is a much slower thing. And there is that, but we also, I have had very interesting discussions with people yesterday and the day before, even when I came, about the pace of things. And we must acknowledge that things are happening. Maybe the media can be better at showing us these images of tragic floods and the like around the world. So there is also evidence, and I think this sort of the visual on the pandemic, be it in these graphs or we could see the numbers flying up. This is maybe a learning point from the pandemic. If we make climate change a bit more visual, then it might be advantageous. Yeah.
There's a question from.
So I had a question about your study of trust and mistrust. Do you have any any conclusions or policy impacts that might help increase public trust of the way scientists communicate?
That's an excellent question. Our focus was on communication and how it's communicated. And I think one of our main conclusions is that trust and mistrust are extremely contextual. So it has to do with, we could see it from country to country during the pandemic. Who was trusting? Were politicians encouraging trust? Were they doing the opposite? So context is one of the most important things, and then it makes it difficult to come with specifics, specific advice. But I think maybe greater attention to the context, and that is also people, about what they think, the values, the cultural norms as well, which were also used by politicians. In Denmark, we're asked to show a societal mind, and this is Denmark is a welfare society, so it really tapped into a sort of a cultural norm or value. And I think Boris Johnson was also talking about, fighting the invisible enemy, and he had his own rhetoric, which was a bit Churchillian. So we used, sorry. So I think context is really important. I think sensitivity norms is very important as well, and values. And then that means studying it, actually involving people, the public, individuals, in understanding what trust means to them. That's part 2 of the next my career, I think, moving into this exact point. Thank you, Jonathan.
Any more questions from the audience? Yes, Christian.
Thank you very much for the presentation. You mentioned you were lucky enough to get some funding also for your research, for roles, etc. And I was wondering also, do you think that doing interdisciplinary research also required figuring out also more means, more resources? And if yes, for which reason? Is it like also a leverage to push more interdisciplinarity and interdisciplinarity?
You're asking, sorry, maybe I should stand here to answer you, then I can see you. If it needs more time, and therefore more money. I think that's probably, time is money, and after all. And I think in that regard, it needs more investment as well. But maybe I'm going to make an appeal now for the whole interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary approach, because we won't resolve the problems if we only use monodisciplinarity, because of course we need monodisciplinarity, we need that expertise. But particularly with these socio-scientific topics, we must engage with interdisciplinary research with the different perspectives and transdisciplinary perspectives as well, so we involve other stakeholders. Yes, thank you so much.
Any other questions from the room? I guess it's time.
I'll just provoke one last question, because you used the future narratives approach, and I know that another ICUP winning project, Cofutures, we also think and reflect a lot on futures. So maybe either Patrick or Johnny would like comment something on Antoinette's project, so find some parallels with your own project, Cofutures. Yes, Johnny, please.
Yeah, I think for us it's also important to talk about knowledge in the sense of what is, trust in knowledge, and the trust in futures. What kind of futures are we going to imagine, and how do we trust that they are the better futures for us? And I think it's also about getting the public to be sort of sentient of all of these possible futures that are out there. And that's of course a project that we work with.
Yes.
But I think it connects really well with the stories about the future we tell ourselves, and how it's also about how much trust we actually have in those stories, and how we have trust in each other. So, expertise as a center point. So I think we really do connect with those.
We did really connect. It was so great to talk to you about it there. Also yesterday and the day before, and we are on the same wavelength on this perspective about creating new knowledge, and that is going into the dark a little bit, new forms of knowledge. So it's wonderful what you do as well. Thanks.
Well, if you haven't got any more questions, we'd like to thank once again Antoinette, Xiaofeng, and give the ICUP certificate to Antoinette. Congratulations. Thank you so much. I would like to invite DEMOCRISIS project, Professor Mjaaland from the University of Oslo, and his discussant, Amaury Peters from Louvain Coopération NGO in Belgium. right?
It's here. Yeah, there it is.
Perfect. Let me first introduce you our ICUP laureate from the University of Oslo, Professor Marius Mjaaland. Well, Mjaaland has very international trajectory. He started his studies in theology in Norway, and he had various fellowships in the UK, Denmark, Germany, prior to becoming professor of theology at the University of, well, it's faculty of theology, but you're a professor of the philosophy of religions.
Sure.
Is that correct? And Marius has been always interested in interdisciplinary research, and for past 15 years had set up various interdisciplinary projects. He is also active in public science and public engagement, writing regularly in local newspapers, as you explained us yesterday, because yesterday Marius participated in Early Career Researcher Forum and very interestingly reflected on his path in interdisciplinary research. And the current project Marius has been working for the past years is called DEMOCRISIS, Environmental Change and the Crisis of Democracy, using Norway as his fieldwork. So Marius, please, the floor is yours, and thank you once again for coming.
Thank you very much, Natalia, and thank you so much for the invitation and for the award. I'm happy to be here to discuss also some of the questions of DEMOCRISIS, which is basically about two of the major fields, the hubs of Circle U, because it's both about climate and about democracy, and we try to let these converge and ask some of the basic questions to democracy due to climate crisis. I want to start with our somewhat provocative hypothesis for this project, that democracy as we know it has proven unable to respond adequately to the current global climate crisis and the local and global nature crisis. And after discussing, we have been working on these questions for several years, and we were somehow frustrated about the ability of democracy to respond. I guess this is more people have this impression. I'll shortly present some of the researchers here before we enter the questions that we raise. Here we have people from biology, theology, geology. So Dag Hessen is one of the professors up here. Simon Kotva, Beate Sjåfjell from law faculty, and Arne Johan Vettelsen from philosophy, and down there Thomas Hillel Eriksen from anthropology. So these are some of the researchers. We are more. We are PhD scholars, postdocs, but these have this term given Anthropocene lectures at University of Oslo. So they're public lectures, but they're also connected to a course where we have around 80 students, and we're now planning to make this kind of Circle U open campus course and invite students from all over Europe to take part in both the public lectures and discuss there, and come to Oslo for a kind of present seminars. A bit more about our project. Which, I mean, it's somehow a huge scope of this. But our starting point is our own country, which is somehow typical and yet exceptional. I mean, giving all the oil and gas for Europe in all the other political crises we have, Norway is kind of on top of the democracy indexes. And still, the climate track record of Norway is disastrous, or rather weak, to say it modestly. And so we wanted to understand, how does democracy work here? How is it able to cope with these challenges? Why is it unable to respond creatively or actively? And maybe studying Norway as case could show us something about democracies more in general, because I think these are common challenges. So here's one of the democracy indexes, where Norway is often on top with other Nordic countries. And here, what was that? What is he talking about?
Because the last one on the list is France.
Oh yeah, really? Yeah, but I mean it's still higher than the US and all this. I mean it's still quite good. 8 points. Everything is above 8 is a kind of an open and good democracy. The US is below that level, actually, for instance. Yeah. But still, I mean, there are some challenges. If it's supposed to move towards a kind of sustainable future, the country should be down there with the targets, and the policies and actions could go a bit down, or even it could be above on the red level. So it's, and this is actually when we discuss, this is Norwegian, but when we discuss CO2 emissions in Norway, it's a small one. But if you think about all the oil and gas extracted from Norway and exported otherwise, it's 10 times as much. And I think this is also relevant because that's the basis for income and for the future of policies in the democratic sense. How could we also morally defend this? This is one of the questions we're discussing. I've divided it now in 4. We have actually 5, but these are the 4 working packages. So I point to the one up there left. It's the question of climate tipping points confronted with socio-economic tipping points. So how can we connect the questions about this or dramatic climate tipping points confronting society? Is it possible to draw on positive social tipping points in order to change policies for a different future? And then we discuss temporality in the Anthropocene. I'll come back to that, but how, for instance, deep time is so different from the time of democracy, which is always on a short-term basis. Then we discuss ethics, epistemology, and spirituality, and also climate psychology, and how democracy is changing or ought to change in order to meet the challenges. First, a bit about these climate tipping points, where you see the bad ones down there in black. So these are, for instance, changes if Amazonas is turning from rainforest to kind of savanna. It's impossible to do it the other way around. So it's a permanent change, and it will have a kind of feedback effect on CO2 emissions, so they will be stronger in the future. And the same with glaciers that are melting, inland ice in Greenland, and so on. So how could democracy respond to these challenges before it's too late? Because when it's too late, it's really dramatic. And taking this climate perspective on democracy rather than the other way around is somehow, it's rather challenging and eye-opening, I think. Then we have Anthropocene temporalities, and down there you see one of the oldest creatures on Earth. It's probably the earliest parts of evolution, deep down in the oceans, and when you look at that, you can see how the climate and how the Earth has a very slow development, and changes occurring now, it might have consequences in 100 years, in 1,000 years, in 10,000 years. And we don't really think about that when you think about democracy. We think about the next election, we think about the economy and short-term perspectives. So how these gaps, how we could connect them in our thinking, that's one of the big challenges. also discussed by Chakrabarty in one of his latest books. Here another picture from deep down, and possibly you know that Norway has decided to well, not only explore but do mining on a big area just outside the coast. It's been, well, rejected by scientists but also politicians worldwide. But they say this is what we need for the green shift. But we'll see. Then comes also the question of climate denial, which is surprisingly high in Norway for an open democracy, around 25%. And we suspect that it might have something to do with the oil industry. We don't know, but it's and what does that do for democracy when people just reject climate change, which many people think of as facts? It's actually above all the other European countries, almost like Saudi Arabia. So it's a high level of climate denial. And we discuss the questions of law and ethics and other approaches, other cosmologies even, how to be challenged, for instance, by Sami thinking about nature. And now we have seen over the last years, I mean, 2019 we had climate anxiety, all the big Fridays for Future demonstrations. Now we tend to observe more resignation, also among young people. And what does that mean for democratic structures and decision making? It is a challenging situation. But summing up a bit, all these big issues we're working on, we take these two words, demos and the krinein, or the crisis. Crisis, first of all, as a threat to the people, to the planet, but also krinein, the Greek word for crisis, is about judgment. How could we judge the situation when we are in such a poly crisis, many crises occurring at the same time? We could see the crisis as an interruption. We could offer critique, but also opportunities for transformation. And in that sense, we see the crisis also as a kind of opportunity for change. Few words on challenges doing interdisciplinary and I would say transdisciplinary work. We're working together on papers and books. We have different methodologies and terminology, even different epistemology based on the disciplines. And we have some, well, controversial issues. We are also discussing, as you said, in the national newspapers. But it means being clear about differences. We could also discuss critically and clarify the questions we find decisive. And maybe remain, we disagree, of course, on key issues, but that's also productive if you respect each other and work together. So I said, sometimes just read the question twice or even 10 times just to let people see how they understand this question. Finally, a bit about the purpose and goals. We have the purpose to develop a profound understanding of why and how Norwegian democracy is challenged by the nature and climate crisis, rendering its responses today ineffective, and compare that internationally to other democracies. But another purpose is also to provide original and transdisciplinary research and research-led collaborative teaching beyond the current state of the art, which we are, as an example down here, based on this new book. Also spark initiatives for long-term thinking within in the scientific and the community, but also among politicians. And initiate processes among politicians, industry leaders and civil society towards a more adequate approaches and policies, institutional innovations and novel democratic practices. So it's somewhat ambitious, but we have started and we will continue. Finally, a beautiful picture from Norway, one of the fjords. If you look at the left there are plans to just cut the whole mountain in order to have new mining for the green shift. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. questions from Amaury Peters, who is going to be our discussant. And I must tell you, it was not easy to find an appropriate discussant for Mario's project, because it is climate, but it's not scientific climate. It's climate plus humanities. And I looked very hard in Paris, in Louvain, at Humboldt University before thinking, well, we've got our external stakeholder who took part in the Sandpits, who took part in different Circle U events. And why don't I ask Amaury? Because Amaury had worked on knowledge democratization most recently and on hierarchies of interdisciplinary research. And other than that, Amaury Peters is bioengineer. He has a doctorate in bioengineering from it's Graduate Institute for Development and International Studies in Geneva. And he has worked for a number of years in Southeast Asia on questions related to agroecology, sustainable agriculture, mental health. And now he's back to Louvain-la-Neuve to be head of the research and development for Louvain Coopération Endure. And he has been collaborating with Circle U now for the last 3 years from the start of the ERIA project. And next week you are going to talk about your seed-funded Sandpits project to Circle U academic chairs at UC Louvain. And yesterday Amaury made a brilliant presentation at Early Career Researcher Forum on transdisciplinary research. So please, your question, comments, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Natalia, for this presentation. First, I'm quite honored to be here discussant of the project of DEMOCRISIS. I think it's another opportunity provided by Circle U to expand and learn more about the different initiatives, and especially the inter and transdisciplinary initiative that has been done in the Alliance. First, do you have burning questions? Because there's a lot of fields that have been included, but it's at the same time it's really touching our, I would say, connection with the society. If for some and most of us we're gonna do our democratic rights soon this month, European election, national election, etc. So, do you have burning questions you would like to address? Yeah, I can see people thinking, so I asked 2 times. I try to build up on the recommendation here that we had for Marius. So my first question is more about the perception of your research by the population, and here Norwegian. Because you really presented in that project that you make a turn and looking into the influence of really climate change on the democratic space. The question I have is, and we discussed a little bit that, how far are Norwegians aware of this reduction of their democratic space?
So, yeah, about the limits of the democratic space, so that we're not really able to cope with the climate crisis. Yes, I think it's slowly developing so that people start perceiving that there are limitations to what we perceive as reality. The government now has said that nature and climate should be a frame for all policies, but they have actually rejected. They don't really do it like that. And we have had some polls also looking at how do people perceive this in our society, and very many people don't really see that as a part of political decisions at all. It's kind of externality. So it's beyond what we think as possible for doing politics. And still, I mean, we are actually using all these resources and thus spending nature and living by nature without really thinking about it. So I think we have tried to do both to understand what is going on in the population, how people actually understand this, but also inform and give lectures, publish a book on the Anthropocene in order to make some awareness of these questions. Not only in order to convince people, but to inform, to make them aware of what's happening. And it's happening slowly, but I think that there is a change in this. At least over the 1 or 2 last years, it's been much more attention to what's happening, yes, and how we build down nature, for instance. Yeah.
And you actually put quite an emphasis on that, because there's like 30 articles produced, but also 70 articles in newspaper produced, so it's quite outstanding publication. I mean, at that level of organization. Do you get any sense of the feedback you got from these publications?
I think it's difficult to measure, but they are. I guess the researchers on this project are among, I think, the most active people doing reach out from science and from the university in Norway at all. So familiar faces to everyone. It's about when these scientists and researchers are writing, I think politicians are listening, and also the common people. But I mean, you would also find many people fundamentally disagreeing with what is said, but at least it's given attention to these decisive questions, I think, even in the public sphere. Yeah. And it goes from the more radical left newspapers to the more intellectual newspapers, and even discussing with the industry and with people who are actually, I think decisions taken by the industry are often underestimated, because they are so important for the actual impact of what's happening. So if you're able to change that, it will have a higher impact to the better of the environment. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So I think this is also one takeaway from that project, is really your investment in generalizing the knowledge and publicizing these in the newspaper as well. So that's quite interesting. Any other questions? I have more. Wow. Okay, great. Great. Wonderful. I can see there were 1, 2, 3. I think the first one was high up, if that's okay. Yeah, please. You probably have to grab the microphone on the back.
Yeah. Thank you. Hello, everyone. So, Professor Marius...
It's not working, I think.
Hello?
Just speak loudly.
Yeah. This one's working.
Yeah.
Now it's working.
Yeah, it's working now. Wonderful. So, Professor Marius, thank you for the presentation. I wanted to ask you, do you think that we need new forms of political engagements to revitalize our democracy? And do you see the future as both an idea and a contested space as a potential shared frame to work on that?
Thank you a lot. That's a huge question, and I would first say yes. I think we need new forms, but the question is how. I mean, what we see now is that democracy is also in a crisis, at least in big parts of Europe, because it's threatened by many more extreme forces to the right, some to the left even, and it sometimes seems like it's collapsing. That is also threatening, and I think the climate questions is a part of it. At least it's used rhetorically, but I think this is also an opportunity. So it's necessary for everyone to rethink democracy, how people engaged in political issues, how legal issues are taken to the courts as a part of democratic processes. I think all these changes are important, and for Norway at least, it's necessary that the big political parties sit together to find some of the solution to these big issues, because if not, they will just throw arguments at each other. But I presume that these changes will come maybe in 10 years. How you can plan getting out of oil and gas, because you can't really, it's in no way sustainable and not morally possible to continue the way we do.
Okay, thanks. There were Jonathan, but also first there were, sorry, the lady just at the bottom.
Yeah.
Thank you. Then after
Thank you very much. I wondered how much do different national setups influence the work you do at the moment for Norway? Looking at the illustrations you gave us, the problems were not in Norway. It didn't look very Norwegian to me, the pictures you showed of the flood and the fire. But this is influencing to which degree in what you're developing at the moment? Because not each country in this world is a Norwegian democracy at the moment. And that's where the problem occurs just as well, even maybe more than in our area here.
Yes, not all the countries are Norwegian, and the problems are not specifically Norwegian. Now, of course, that is the problem of a climate. So it's caused one place, and it's happening all over the globe, all over the planet. So making people conscious of that kind of responsibility, I mean, that is a starting point. What we have been looking at with Norway, what is exceptional there, is this high standard of democracy, but the bad standards of climate policies. And we think it might also be the situation for instance, Western democracies as a whole. They are a bit better on on climate policies, maybe a bit worse on democratic standards, but that kind of paradox, because we expect democracies to be able to deal with such questions, and I still think it's the best way we have it. But I have to deal with them. But there are also, I mean, democracy is on both sides here. Democracies have been fueled by economic growth, which is the reason for its support partly, and it's for its stabilization. So if you lose that part and think of degrowth or green growth, it might be more difficult to have the support you need for a democratic government. And I think these big questions, we are a bit anxious to raise them, but these are also below the problem of democracy with facing climate crisis. Maybe that's what I can give you for a short answer. Yeah, but we should discuss it. Yeah.
Thank you. There were Elizabeth and Jonathan.
Thank you. That was a very nice presentation. The subject is so vast. It's tempting to say, what could I do personally? But somewhere between what should each of us do and what should the powers that be do. As a medical doctor, I recently listened to a talk from a medical colleague at one of our scientific meetings, hematology in my case, on the climate disaster, or the pending disaster. And I was struck by the different reactions because it came from my peer group. Now, talking in a session on interdisciplinarity, it's maybe not very fashionable to say, I listen to it more if one of my club talks about it. And as a professional theologian, are we doing enough to exploit the fact that we need our peer group to tell us each one of us must be doing something?
It's a good question. You think of when I go outside, or when we're working in the group, or how did you perceive that? Yes.
If a doctor says to me,
yes,
if you don't do something, your kids are going to be burnt to death within the next 10 years, I listen to it more than if a politician or a journalist or Greta Thunberg says it, because these people are in some kind of ether space that I don't live in.
Yeah. I mean, I think the researchers on the project have very different disciplinary background, and they are both talking with their peers, and they talk with the public, so they meet people at schools and in public audiences. And I guess probably a philosopher or a theologian, I'm trained as a philosopher, would understand my arguments better than people from physics or medicine. But I guess since this is really kind of a transdisciplinary work, so we have even the voices from different disciplines talking in these Anthropocene lecture series or in the books we've published. And so I agree with you, but I think the point is learning to listen because this perspective is represented, but still you need the other perspectives in order to have the big picture. So I guess that is the way we try to respond to that. We can't really please everyone, but yeah.
Okay, thanks. This reminds me of a very interesting conference where I actually joined, and they were a medical doctor and a climate specialist who present together, and they really brought their own perspective together into the results, and that was a high impact presentation in this case. Trying to address a bit your point. Maybe that's also a way to present interdisciplinary research in the future. I have another question, if we still have time, even more, but some have already addressed my question.
One question from Elizabeth over there, and Louisette. Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'll bring you. Okay, the microphone is going to you.
Thank you and congratulations for your project. Working at the cross junction of democracy and the climate crisis, I would like to know, did this change anything in your vision on how a scientist should be responsible for the society? And did it change anything in the way you're doing science?
Well, big and good question. Thank you. It has been a big part of our debate internally, how to respond to the society and how to, if we should align with activists or not, because it's a question about credibility of research and science, which I think everyone here is think as the main priority, having that credibility. But wouldn't credibility also mean that you talk about the urgency of the question and even join forces with others? So this is an open debate, and the researchers disagree on that topic. They have different positions, but I think it's important to keep that discussion alive within the scientific community, because I think it's the most important is to have credible research and somehow to remain credible in your analysis of society and so on. But there is also a need to talk about the challenges which have to be faced rather quickly.
But based on the fact that you work on transdisciplinarity, straight away that format changed the role. I mean, the narrative is completely different. At the moment you say transdisciplinarity, you are just equal to any participant, stakeholders, a politician. So, how does it fit?
I think we somehow respect the different disciplines in their analysis of the situation. So, natural sciences, biology, geosciences have, I guess, the most important role in explaining what is happening and what has to be done, like the IPCC and so on. But they don't have the tools to analyze how that influences society. So it's like different roles among the researchers, and you can have these challenges going across the disciplines, from a psychologist, from an anthropologist, and thereby I think we can look for a solution of how to communicate this, even in television or radio. Yes.
I will just focus on a point you mentioned. You talked about indigenous initiative. And this, I think it's very important. And I don't, maybe your methodology about this question has to be very precise, and maybe it has some impact on the general level, because it's a very tiny point, but today the question of nature, considering this nature with this question of indigenous initiative, has some impact on it. So how you can introduce it in your methodology?
Yes, I can try to do it very quickly. I think we have to deal with different understandings of reality. So you need the scientific voice, where I would say the indigenous perspectives doesn't count very much. It's about numbers and scientific theories. So I would say we are following at least 3 different ways of doing this. The natural sciences, the more common space of political decisions, and the challenges, I would say, from indigenous perspectives, because in Norway we have the Sami population, which has been suppressed, and they are sometimes challenging the way we deal with the climate crisis. For instance, wind turbines in the place where they normally have reindeers. So they had to. So that was threatened by these big new solutions, technical solutions. And they had to actually, they were decided by the court that they should take it away or find another solution, because it was not sustainable in this wider sense. It's sometimes difficult to even translate from one to the other, and without, for instance, avoiding Orientalism. This is another kind of romantic view of how life could be, right? So really finding the challenges for how we could rethink society and values within, and thereby living together, respecting also these values and learning from them. I'm afraid I can't say very much more precisely, but I agree that there are some huge questions there, and we're talking about knowledge regimes, which kind of knowledge regimes are producing what kind of society and which effects on nature. And there you are really right, yes.
I think it's a challenge because the indigenous thinking is in the same time very particular, and it's also something that has impact on the way to divide the discipline, because it's something that crosses all the discipline.
Thank you. I'm receiving signals that we have to close this session. So thanks for these well-engaged questions. I had already 2 more, but I would like to finish to thank again Marius for his presentation, and also put a reflection for everyone about the importance of reconciling the different location about emission, but also what we extract and hear, and how this has to be counted on a global level, but also the time reconciliation. You speak about that, and that was my question. So how this time difference about the geological time, but also the political time and our lifetime, and also it drives the question also about what are ourselves as the role we're doing as a human. Also, this is probably all related questions, and the way we reconcile this would be potentially a solution. That's a reflection for you for the rest of the day. Thank you very much. Thank you, Marius.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, all right. Thank you. Thank you again. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you, Marius. Thank you very much. Thank you, Amaury. Now we are staying with the University of Oslo for the last ICUP winning project, and we have Professor Jonathan Weitzman from Université Paris-Cité, whom everybody knows, I guess, for the last presentation. Jonathan would like
I just want to say one word before they start. So, can you hear me? Because I know this one. Yeah. So it's called the Inter-Circle U Prize. So I'm on the evaluating committee. I just want to say a few things. First of all, we discovered 3 years ago that it's a prize, but there's no prize money. In fact, there's no prize. The prize is the little bit of paper that they got. That's the prize. So I want to thank all the recipients of the prize for coming all the way here. And the second thing is we had originally hoped that it would be inter-Circle U, but actually we had to give out the prize before there was any opportunity for people to work between Circle U partners. So what the committee decided was to award prizes for interdisciplinary research that would showcase potential for people from different disciplines to interact. And then there was a big discussion, as there always is, what does interdisciplinary research mean? Because it was also never defined, like the prize was never defined, and the Inter-Circle U was never defined. So we had some discussions, and these are, I won't bore you, they're ongoing discussions, what we mean by interdisciplinary. But I think Antoinette summed it up beautifully when she said the extra richness. So what we were looking for were projects that have extra richness. And the first year, we were a little bit disappointed in the real richness of some of those projects. And I must say that it's got better and better. And this year, there were really wonderful projects that really had that. And this project that is going to be presented now, it's called Cofutures. But I just want to read one sentence from the proposal, which says, the core 10 members represent the disciplines of, hold on to your seats, culture studies, museology, comparative literature, architecture, choreography and dance, English studies, film and media production, design research, journalism, computer science, history, science fiction studies, business studies, creative writing, and anthropology.
Okay. Shall I just give them the certificate straight away?
So the project is really very, very innovative, very interdisciplinary, and we're very lucky that it's being presented by two early career researchers. So Jomi is a postdoc and Patrick is a PhD student, and they're going to tell you about the project. So.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. And just to complete what Jonathan just said, well, we don't have the principal investigator today with us, Bodhisattva Chattopadhyay. He's not early career researcher anymore, but he's a young parent. He's having his first baby this week, and he's already on paternity leave. So he couldn't even join us by Zoom because the baby is really coming. But he'll have a certificate. And we're very lucky to have two of his 10 project members. We have Johnny Joseph, who is postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Oslo in creative design. He first studied in India, and he chose School of Architecture in Oslo, particularly for the design program. So he traveled all the way from Delhi to Oslo to do this graduate program in creative design. And then he joined Cofutures project. I think he joined 2 years ago. Johnny is also interested in Anthropocene, in climate change, in all forms of creative design, and in speculative fiction. As for Patrick, he's finishing his PhD anytime soon, this summer, in cultural studies. He's Brazilian and American, completed first part of his studies in Brazil, then moved to New York, where he worked as a journalist. And after this career in real life, he returned to academia, to Cofutures project, went all the way to Oslo to work with Cofutures project, and his fields are science fiction and speculative fiction. And he's doing lots of field work in South America, in Brazil, but also in Argentina. So they'll tell more you about Cofutures projects right now. Thank you for being with us, Patrick and John. The floor is yours.
So we're going to do this as a duo, you know, so I will start first of all, this is an honor for us to be here representing our team members. And this will be a pretty short presentation and brief, so it could give you an idea of what our project is about. And then we can comment on it as we go. We have our PI, Bodhisattva Chattopadhyay, is affiliated researcher Ingrid M. Felixdal, Jomi, Sami Ahmad Khan, Joe Leckman, Merv Tabur, Burswein Thorson, Regina Kanyuwang, and Marta Tveit. And these are the sources of funding that we have, the ERC, the Norwegian Research Council, and the Marie Curie Actions. So there's a ERC 2020 Horizons grant, there's a proof of concept Cofutures literacy grant, which is what we are working on now. There's the NFA grant, and then the Marie Curie. And the core is we have 3 PhDs, 4 postdoctoral, 1 research assistant, 2 librarians, and also we should mention Ursula Münster from the Oslo School of Environmental Humanities as an important collaborator, and of course Vita Kevedarati from the administration of EYU, who has been an invaluable asset in helping us navigate the really difficult compliance process of these projects. And then we also have 3 external collaborators, and visiting scholars, and as well as 1 media and video consultant. Joby?
Yeah, so I think it's important to talk about like the disciplines. So Jonathan just mentioned, like it is a doozy when it comes to like organizing and actually meeting each other on these platforms, because we are so diverse, and not just with disciplines but also internationally. We are like a totally international group. I think 1 Norwegian out of the rest is completely from all parts of the world. And I think this really helps because it's also a platform for learning. We are there not to compete on knowledges, but actually to build on each other's knowledges and flourish. And I think that's an attitude that's kept us together really well. And all of these things, and actually the work that we do reflects on building a lot of this stuff. So I think that's a takeaway from us, at least from a project point of view, that this work can only be possible with a mutual learning and a mutual respectful atmosphere where we're all interested and passionate about learning, about the world and ourselves. So yeah, I think the research question is also about how, Cofutures is all about how do people imagine futures. And most often than not, futures when it comes to climate change, the people most affected by it, almost always the most marginalized in the world, outside this room. And it turns out that a lot of people imagine different kinds of futures. And then also about how they, want to reclaim these futures for themselves in order to, make an impact in the world, in their everyday life. It's also about technological change and how, all of these things come together in how, society imagines different futures. So I think this is a big question, like what can we learn from this? And in that spirit of learning is important. It's a respectful dialogue. It's not about what can we get, but rather what do we learn from each other. And I think that's the spirit that we really need to build on. As you can see, we do a lot of work. There's a lot of production. So given the broad range of things we do, there's a lot of things that we do, which not just related to publications, but also a whole sorts of media production, interviews, documentaries, music itself, and games. So it's a complex multimedia, complex research outcomes that we develop. And like I said, it's also about exhibitions. So we bring in the public, disseminate this information, disseminate this work that we do, and build on that. And we also learn from those experiences. So I think one of the biggest impacts that we've done is probably the project has established this whole new field of co-futurisms, which is complex, coeval, and compossible. So many of these futures, some futures are more possible than others, and in collaboration with each other.
We see those co-futurisms as way in which societies are responding to the failure to imagine the future, and that connects a bit with Marius's project on climate change. It's basically these futurisms are creating new forms of political engagement. They are future-centered, but are also centered on the present, on the practices and the community building necessary to enact real change in the world.
Absolutely. And this is, we can go into details, but I think it's important to understand that a lot of these activities they go through a whole cycle of development and process, and all of these skills that we've developed, our own trajectories as individual researchers have also gone through many disciplinary backgrounds, as Natalia mentioned. So we want to talk about two projects just to give you a brief overview. We can't really go through all of the productions that we do. I think it's just going to take you 2 days. We're going to talk about this exhibition that we've managed to produce, Beyond Barcode, which is asking the youth of Oslo, what do you imagine? What kind of futures do you imagine for Oslo in the next 30, 50, 70 years? And they sort of, so it's a beautiful piece of work. It's still up till end of 2024, I believe. So if you ever come to Oslo, definitely pay us a visit. It's pieces of exhibitions, co-produced, co-designed by the youth at different age groups coming together or cross workshops. And what is the future to imagine? So you can also see a lot of traditional tropes of technology solving everything, techno-optimism, but also challenging those things. Political change, social change, and all of these are mixed and coming together. Different future scenarios.
It's important to note, and that's a connection of Antoniette's project, this is a real participatory approach in which we get people together and make them think about the future, and then we try to materialize that into short stories or exhibitions or design fictions that Antoniette has done.
Yes. And so the other project, I think it's Kalpavigyan, which is speculative. It's a film project. It's a documentary about Bangla science fiction. So it's also it's been it's all over the world now. It's been traveling to many. It's an open access film, so you're free to view it at the website kalpavigyan.com. It's about the history of Bangla science fiction, which is Bangla is a language in South Asia, and how it was running parallel to many of these, and it's many of these hidden histories, many of these contemporary science fiction authors were coming out of the global south. And so this is a historical document that sort of talks to these people and asks about what kind of futures were you imagining. And it's a quite rich history. And it's often not really talked about in the global north as much. And I think this is something that if you're going to look for better futures, I think the idea is already there. We just have to really understand them. And I think not in an extractive way, but I think really be open to the idea that the solutions and the ideas and the principles we're looking for are already out there. They don't have to be in this ether of the unknown, but they actually are there. People are doing this, every day, and even today.
And we have conducted a large number of interviews for our project for data gathering. We've interviewed 300 people in 20 countries, and now we're in the process of turning those interviews into 4 separate documentaries. One on Latin American speculative fiction and practices, another one in African and Norwegian speculative practices, in China as well, and in India.
So, on another note, we are also doing work with, different, again, it's not just within our group that we're interdisciplinary, we're also reaching out to, researchers outside our groups, and that ranges from UN innovation teams, space sector, commercial space industry, but also with artists and environmental startups. So there's a whole lot of work that's happening under the hood, and we enjoy that process as well. I guess this is a bit more formal idea of even it's not just about it's good to do it within our space, but what happens to the researchers when they leave? And I think this is also a testament because they also are more relevant to the academic space, but also trying to spread out. I mean, it's a more pan-European project as well. And yeah, I guess awards and prizes. So, this is World Fantasy Award, British Science Fiction Association Awards. So I guess that's something we can...
Amongst our members, we have science fiction writers like Regina Kanu-Wang, who's really accomplished, and she is responsible for some of those awards.
Yes. Again, like I said, we also have partnerships with other institutions, not just in Oslo and Norway, but also outside, internationally. So I think this is sort of maybe a good segue into what is it that what drives us is an important thing. How do we manage to keep this together? It's a very genre-defying, discipline-defying practice, but it also means that how do we manage to put people together is an important thing, and it's mostly a lot of us. Almost 100% of us are absolutely passionate about what we do. We're totally interested and invested in actually learning about the world. I think that's such a interesting thing, and the impact that we do is based on that. So a lot of our work and our impact is also plurinational, pluriversal. We bring in those perspectives, and this is what makes us excited about what we do.
I just wanted to say a few words about our PI, who couldn't be here today. And even though he has a very horizontal participatory management style, it's pretty much all due to him. He's the one who applied to the grant, and he's the one who created this framework that we are applying now. So we should thank him and celebrate his work and pushing us to do our best.
Absolutely, and that's why we're here. So thank you so much for listening. That was great.
So I should actually add that the PI, it's the first ERC in the social sciences in the whole of Norway, right? So he's to be commended for that. So I've just been told that we have time for one question. So I'm going to ask, scratch your own itch. I'm going to ask the question that interests me the most, which is on this long list of disciplines. Don't take this as a criticism. There's a key discipline that's missing, and that's genetics. And so first of all, is there room for geneticists? But more importantly, do you think this approach, so speculative, narrative prediction, and feeding back into research, so you're using it in the context of climate change, but do you think this is an approach that could be used in other really hard scientific disciplines, this multidisciplinary speculative fiction, future prediction feedback?
Well, we believe that speculative fiction and the communities and practices that are connected to it, they already are doing interdisciplinarity in a very organic way. So if you're talking about epigenetics, for instance, yes, we can talk about the film Gattaca, for instance, with Ethan Hawke, which is an example of how this narrative fiction approaches the issue of genetic engineering and the societal and technological issues that might arise from that.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, yes, it definitely is possible, but I think it's also the people in the room should come with that kind of openness to be able to see this has value rather than trying to see, it's like trying to, but the burden of proof shouldn't be on the creative fields to be able to give you that. But I think if you come with that space, and the same thing that we mentioned is that science fiction has been doing this quite a lot. The speculative realm or the speculative fiction has been really untangling or really asking these hard questions. And I think it's important to sort of get that on board. And I think once we have that kind of open learning environment where we're just trying to figure out the world for us, and I think it's definitely possible.
Okay, so I'm going to sneak in one more question, because this is really a beautiful showcase of interdisciplinary research at a Circle U, but also just feeding on from what we discussed yesterday. You're two early career researchers. You came from across the world, from a career in journalism and a career in design. So what attracted you to the project?
For me, it was, I think I was, one of the things which I mentioned yesterday about the early career was basically what we end up doing was challenging to the disciplinary frameworks themselves, so to go beyond. And I think this was one of the reasons why I joined Cofutures, was that this was the space that actually did that kind of flourishing work, the fertile ground for trying out ideas that would never be, not allowed, but I think expected in a particular disciplinary framework. And I think challenging those frames, and it's happening all the time. It's happening all the time. So having those fertile boundaries or the grounds to actually do that was what Cofutures for me personally offered. But maybe Patrick is a...
Well, I've always been really fascinated by speculative fiction. I wrote my master's degree in the Cold War, speculative fiction and its relationships with society. So when I saw this project, I said, well, this is for me. I need to apply for this. Because it had the ideas had a freshness to it. And also the way in which it was about engaging with society and actually trying to do problem solving.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we're going to have to go for lunch. I was a little bit mean because actually there are 3 certificates, one for Jomi, one for Patrick, and one for the baby.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
There's someone somewhere taking somebody else. That's for your chest.
Colleagues, before we all go for lunch, I would also like to thank my fellow Walk Package 2 leads, Jonathan, Knud, and Ivan, who are all here. Mette Halskov Hansen from Oslo is missing. She's in Taiwan. I would like to thank them so much for all our collaboration for the 3 years, because they were there to disseminate ICUP calls, to evaluate the applications, to follow up with the ICUP laureates, and I also thank ICUP Evaluation Panel. Not all of Evaluation Panel members are here, but thank you both to my Walk Package leads and to the Evaluation Panel for the great work they've done for the ICUP for those 3 years. Thank you.
Grab this real quick.